HeroScape!
Woo! 2000. That was probably overdone. We're going back to 2004 to do another tier list for classic HeroScape. I'm Jackson Warfield, and you're in Jackson's Warfield. The Warfield has existed for over 20 years for HeroScape, and I have been participating on that Warfield for the vast majority of that time. The first time I ever played HeroScape was late 2006. Today's tier list is going to be characters from the first expansion for classic HeroScape. Mallidon's Prophecy, Wave 1. Who's Mallidon? I don't know, but I know these units. Played with these units for years.
Phrasing?
Now, 2004 saw one wave of expansions. You had 3 sets of common squads and 1 set of unique characters. And that was it. It wasn't until 2005 that you started seeing the dragons and the Gen Con expansions. We'll get to that in the next classic HeroScape tier list video.
The dragons are on
but
their
today,
way.
We're sticking with 2004. First pack to come out in Wave 1 was the Grut Orcs pack. Now, these were common squads. As again, I mentioned, a lot of early HeroScape was actually common squads. This is going to be a little bit different than Age of Annihilation or modern HeroScape. This means that you could buy multiple packs of these and have multiple squads of these units going at once. So if some of these units seem relatively weak, say the only 3 or 4 models with very low defense numbers, remember you could run multiple squads of them. I like to think of them as running with 3 or 4 to get the full benefit. And the way HeroScape works with common squads is, let's say you run 3 out at once. If one of your models gets taken out, you can start with the next turn. You can just start moving another one that's been sitting back in the reserve, and maybe you have it at the other end of the map, which isn't ideal. When you have 3 or 4 squads, you get to move the max number of models for a while. So in the Grut Orcs pack, you had the Arrow Gruts and the Blade Gruts. First, we're going to talk about the Arrow Gruts. The Arrow Gruts are one of the more interesting squads in the history of HeroScape. These are orcs, and they begin with very weak attack and defense numbers. So they're ranged orcs. They hit you with the arrows, but they only attack for 1 and defend for 1 until, first of all, you get them on height. That's a kind of a necessary thing here. So they start to attack for 2, potentially defend for 2. The other thing you need to do with the Arrow Gruts is take advantage of their bonding. The Arrow Gruts have beast bonding. The characters you're going to be bonding them the most with are going to be the Swag Riders, which at this point were not released yet. In fact, when the set was initially released, they're either bonding with Mimring, and actually that might be about it. So the way the Arrow Gruts work is you take a turn with them. You can also take a turn with the Swag Rider. So that's the orc riding, it's like a warg rider from Lord of the Rings. Think about it that way.
Send out your warg riders.
So long as the Arrow Gruts are next to the Swag Rider, they get an additional attack and defense. And the Swag Rider is a common hero, so you can have a lot of those Swag Riders. And they're actually pretty cheap by points too. So what you do with the Arrow Gruts is you get them up on height and you get them surrounded by Swag Riders. You can actually stack Swag Rider bonuses. So you can get some of your Arrow Gruts shooting for like 4 attack dice, which given how cheap they are, they're only 40 points per squad. So that's, like 13 points per model. And remember, you can get like 3 or 4 squads of them. Swag Riders are cheap. They're only 25 points each. They had 6 range, which is pretty good for HeroScape range, especially early. Newer modern HeroScape actually has weaker or shorter range units. So a lot more of range 5 as opposed to 6 and 7. The Arrow Gruts are an A-tier unit. Oh. They're a fun one to play with, and they can be pretty powerful per the points. You can also use Krug for bonding. Krug came out a little bit later. Krug is a melee unit and the Arrow Gruts are ranged units. So if you want to do that, what you may be doing is simultaneously running Krug up by himself and then putting all your Arrow Gruts in height while Krug is kind of a screen for them, which is actually an interesting strategy. And then once Krug is out in the fray, then you use the bonding for the Arrow Gruts to bring up some Swag Riders, which are very fast units, so they can get up to wherever the Arrow Gruts are pretty quick. There were no point adjustments for the Arrow Gruts. They actually might be tough to buy at this point. If you're feeling disappointed about that, I understand that. Because they were a common squad, the price is higher because they were bought out. All the old HeroScape common squad packs got more expensive than the uniques because people were buying multiples because you put multiples in an army. Ignoring the price, the real life cost of the models, the Arrow Gruts are an A tier. And the other orcs from this pack are the Blade Gruts. The Blade Gruts are the melee orcs. The Blade Gruts start off with 2 attack and 2 defense. They also have bonding. The Blade Gruts can be used with Grimnak from the Master Set, from the Rise of Valkyrie Master Set, as well as Tornak, who is going to be one of the units we talk about in today's video. And you may actually want to use them for both. You see, because you have so many Blade Gruts when you run it as a common squad, only 40 points per squad, they have 4 models per squad, so you can run 3 or 4 of these squads no problem. So you get up to, say, 16 Blade Gruts on the board. And you can first bond with Grimnak and then bond with Tornak once Grimnak is taken out. It's actually a very nice setup. And Grimnak and Tornak both give bonuses to adjacent Blade Gruts. So your Blade Gruts start with 2 attack, 2 defense. They can easily go up to 3 and 3 and potentially 4 and 4 if you get height or you get a double bonus going. Part of the reason why I like the Blade Gruts is because of how flexible they are, both by being pretty cheap, again at 40 points, and also having a good move number. If you're doing homegrown maps in HeroScape, which is one of the most fun ways to play, you're often going to have maps where it's tough to get places, so having a higher move number is a big deal. Going from 5 move up to 6 move is actually pretty significant. That's the main difference between the Blade Gruts and the later released Heavy Gruts. Blade Gruts could also bond with some other units such as Narek the Glacian Swag Rider, which, because that's a Gen Con unit, was less often used. Also not as strong as Tornak and Grimnak. Interestingly, Narek the Glacian Swag Rider bonds with the Blade Gruts, doesn't bond with the Arrow Gruts at all, even though it's a Swag Rider, which is interesting. I'll say both of the Gruts also get benefits from Ornak, the flag bearer. Most units have a flag bearer that gives them a bonus. It's kind of understood with classic HeroScape. The Blade Gruts are also in the A tier. They're right there with the Arrow Gruts. This is one of the cooler packs to get, and it's nice that this was actually the first expansion to come out for classic HeroScape. Doing great here. Let's see how the rest of this wave does. The second pack in Mallidon's prophecy was Snipers and Vipers, with the Venoc Vipers and the Omnicron Snipers. First, we're going to talk about the Venoc Vipers. These guys were the green original versions of Vipers that you could get in some of the Walmart versions of the Rise of the Valkyrie Master set, where you got the Elite Onyx Vipers, which were just repaints of the Venoc Vipers. That came out a little bit later because the Elite Onyx Vipers, I think, I believe they were a Gen Con promo too. I know they were a promo unit. I actually don't think there are any promos that weren't Gen Con promos, but nonetheless, the Venoc Vipers are a common squad. For 40 points, you get 3 of them. So imagine a bunch of, 9 or 12 Vipers, most likely when you're seeing them in play. They have 0 defense, but they can swim through water. They're pretty fast, 7 move. If you include a Venoc Warlord, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, which is kind of a necessary thing if you're going to run Venoc Vipers, their move number actually goes up to 9. The Venoc Vipers also have an attack of 3, which is solid for such a cheap unit, and they have a frenzy attack. They're a frenzy unit. There are a handful of units in HeroScape that are frenzy units. What the frenzy ability does, at the end of your turn, you get to roll the 20-sided die, and if you roll, I think it's in all cases a 15 or higher, 16 or higher, so a 25% chance, you get to take another turn with them. So you can have, in theory, endless turns with the Venoc Vipers. They're a fast strike unit, like an alpha strike kind of a thing. They're so fast that you can run up, and if you get first initiative, you get the first attack off, maybe even get extra turns in there, because they're not going to survive so too long once they actually start getting shot. The fact that they can slither through water without stopping means that they're a great ambush unit. You don't want to play them without the Venoc Warlord, which that's more specific to the Venoc Warlord, but we'll give the Venoc Vipers some credit for being better units with certain synergies. Venoc Vipers are a B tier unit. The reason why they're B tier is because if you don't get the advantage, you don't get to use them right off the bat, or if someone takes out your Venoc Warlord, they become a lot weaker. Very easy to take out from range 2, even though they're a common squad, because they have 0 defense. Although technically they do get 1 defense from height, actually can have all 12 of them taken out relatively quickly. Compare that to other common squads, say the Blade Gruts, for example, which aren't as fast and aren't going to engage you as quickly, but you're talking about at least 2 defense for each of them, and you got more units per the point cost. So that's why the Venoc Vipers are a B tier unit, not quite up in the A tier, although a lot of the units in this expansion wave were really fun units, and the Venoc Vipers are very fun. Now we talked about the Vipers, let's talk about the Snipers. The Omnicron Snipers, note they're not Omicron, it's Omnicron, which can be easy to get wrong. The Omnicron Snipers are ranged units, believe it or not. They have a range of 7, and when they hit you, their skulls count double. You notice their attack number is 1, which effectively means that their attack number is 2. So when they get on height, and they're rolling 2 dice, now effectively their attack is 4. And that's pretty strong. You think that's strong?
You think that's bad?
They have other ways to go even higher than that. We're going to talk about another hero, Taelord, pretty soon, that gives another attack to them. Which that's a bit of an unlikely alliance with the devil-looking guy and these Transformer snipers. They can get up to 3 attack, which is effectively 6. Later expansions would bring out the Omnicron Repulsors, which then can increase their attack dice even more. So these guys have a huge upside. They're not too weak either. Again, they're a common squad. They're more pricey. For 100 points, you get 3 models of them. So you're not going to realistically put out 4 squads of them, get any kind of support with them. 3 defense means they should be able to survive some hits as they try to get elevation on your opponent. But if they get into position, they can win the game for you. They're that deadly. The Omnicron Snipers are an A tier as well.
Oh.
They're high A tier. They're so much fun because, you know, it's like you're lording this threat over your opponent. Like, and you can use that to your advantage. Your opponent's not going to want to let you get your Omnicron Snipers in position, so you get to manipulate your opponent in that way. They might look past the fact that you're maybe going for an objective or you got a big dragon or something like that, because the Omnicron Snipers are so deadly that they are the focus. One downside that's potentially keeping them from being in the S tier is the later expansion that brings out Zetacron, which is probably the, you know, the big guy of them. There's no bonding between them, so that's a bit of a missed opportunity. The next pack of commons, IX, or the 9 Roman Legion. We have the Roman Archers and the Roman Legionnaires. First, we're going to talk about the Roman Archers. The Roman Archers are a ranged unit, similar to the Arrow Gruts. They have a range of 6. They're 55 points, so they're a little more pricey, and they're kind of slow off the bat with move of 4. They have 2 attack and 1 defense. But they have an ability where they can combine their attacks. With the Arrow Volley special attack, you can, instead of attacking 3 times for 2, you can attack 1 time for 6, which if that doesn't sound like an improvement, it is, because remember, 1 attack for 6 means your defender only gets to roll defense dice once against you. Armor piercing style attack, you gotta take out a big guy or someone with big defense. You'd much rather attack once for 6 dice than 3 times for 2 dice. Despite being Romans, their only real synergy is with the Sacred Band, where they can give the Sacred Band extra defense as part of a disciplined army. So they don't get necessarily a bonus there, but they're an okay ranged unit, a little bit underwhelming and a little bit pricier. The Roman Archers are a C tier. If you want to go thematic and make sure you have archers in your Roman army, they're fine to include. But you're not going to build your army around them. They're not that powerful. And honestly, in my experience, you don't use the arrow volley too much. The Roman archers need to all be at the same level to use the attack. And if you're trying to get height, that's actually hard to do. With a lot of maps, you're not going to have like a big plateau that you can go shoot from. So the Roman archers are down in the C tier. The other Romans are the Roman Legionnaires. The Roman Legionnaires are 50 points, so they're cheaper than the Roman archers. Although you get 4 Legionnaires in a pack, or in a squad. A few things going on with the Legionnaires. Like the Roman Archers, they can help the Sacred Band with the Disciplined Army, but they also got Warlord bonding, which is a lot of units that you could bond with them. So they can, before taking a turn with the Roman Legionnaires, you could use, I'm gonna have to read this one, you can take a turn with Marcus Decimus Gallus, who we'll talk about in a second, Mibursa, Mogrim Forgehammer, Nigaxa, Parmenio, Valgard, and the Venoc Warlord. Good bonding options. You're almost always gonna have someone that you can move with them. They start with 3 attack and 2 defense, but they get multiple types of bonuses. One, if you're using Marcus Decimus Gallus, which is the natural bonding target for them, they can get an extra attack, so it brings their attack up to 4. Then they get a shield wall defense bonus. So if you line them up where each of your Legionnaires is adjacent to 2 other of your Legionnaires, so if you're in a wall, they're almost all gonna get this bonus. 2 defense bonuses. They actually get +1 for each of their buddies that's next to them. So you can have a bunch of guys here for not too expensive a cost of 4 attack, 4 defense, and you don't even need height to get there. Once you start adding height into that, now you got 5 attack, 5 defense. I've had a lot of fun with these guys. One way I like to set up HeroScape is if you have a lot of people, you don't necessarily need to do big teams. You could do arena style maps where you make a bunch of different maps, kind of the size of like a 9 hex hexagon. So you take 7, I think it is, of the normal 7 hex one. So you make like a 7 hex of a 7 hex and build maps on there with starting zones coming off of the hexagons. But you make a bunch of thematic maps and you just do a series of one-on-one battles where everyone's there to play that day. On maps like that, it can be pretty reasonable to also get your Roman Legionnaires up together and get a shield wall going. If you're good with HeroScape tactics, knowing how to use engagement and elevation to your advantage, you can keep that bonus going and find a lot of opportunities to overpower your opponent. So the Roman Legionnaires are a lot of fun. They're also A tier. They're not S tier though. They're just another really good unit, which is kind of the theme for the first wave of HeroScape. Arguably, there was like power creep when you get to this first expansion too, where you had all these common squads that were pretty cheap. That's maybe not the worst thing for the launching of a game. Especially back in 2004, where you could buy multiple sets of the common squads for a much more reasonable price. We're talking like $20 for one of these packs, as opposed to today, which would be more like 55 or 60. Roman Legionnaires, A tier. And the last pack in Wave 1 was the Heroes of Bleakwood. This was the unique units expansion of Wave 1. And that's how a lot of the HeroScape expansions were. You would have 3 packs, 2 units each that were for common squads. And then you had 1 pack of, I think it was almost always 5 heroes that were uniques. Obviously, some got mixed in because you had some common heroes come out from time to time, but that was the typical wave model. So the first of these heroes we're going to talk about is Kelda, the Kyrie warrior. This pack had 2 Kyrie warriors, Kelda and Taelord, which is a lot less than came in the more recent Kyrie Warrior expansion for modern HeroScape. The Kelda is the healer, which goes well with Raylan, who everyone already had as the defense aura. So Kelda actually will heal your characters. Kelda costs 80 points, 5 life, 3 defense for herself. Kelda could heal units that she was next to, and how effective the healing was based on a 20-sided die roll. It was kind of funny. Actually, if you roll a 1 when healing with Kelda, you actually damage the unit, which is a fun thing to add to the game. How to get distracted and use the wrong spell or something like that. I don't know. If you roll a 2 to 5, you remove 1 marker. 6 to 17, you remove 2 markers. And 18 to 20, you remove all markers. To use the healing, you obviously have to take a turn with Kelda. Kelda has to be adjacent to the unit you're healing. So you're not going to want to heal someone on the front lines because you're going to lose Kelda. Kelda's going to become an immediate target if you're trying to heal someone on the front lines. And you don't get that much healing unless you have a larger unit. So if you had one of the dragons that got released in 2005, that's a lot to heal, and Kelda can be a nice inclusion in your army if you have characters like that. Or maybe you have Krug and you want to run again. Kelda isn't that efficient to work with. Sometimes you're just better off having damaged characters as opposed to saying dedicating entire turns to heal them. On your team, if you have Kelda, your opponent is going to target the units that could be healed more aggressively. Maybe you want that, so that's a good tactical thing to force your opponent into, but you're not necessarily going to use Kelda as much. Kelda has only 2 attacks, so it's not like she's going to be that great if you have to turn her around and make her an attacking Kyrie. Kelda is C tier, because Kelda can occasionally get that full heal on that giant that you have, and it'll get you almost like 200 points worth in 1 turn. If you have a dragon, for example, that's down to 1 life left, it might as well be dead, because HeroScape, because you have to set your order markers around in advance, you don't want to risk that dragon's 1 life is going to just be taken off by like a bespoke sniper who's just looking for something to do, then you'll waste an entire turn. So getting a unit from 1 health or very low health all the way back to beginning is like duplicating the unit. On the rare chance that you actually pull that off, Kelda's pretty good. But that's rare. So that's why Kelda's in the C tier. The next unit is Marcus Decimus Gallus. Not to be confused with...
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius.
Or maybe to be confused with him. Marcus is a Roman emperor-looking guy. For 100 points, you get kind of a normal hero. Good life number at 6 life with 3 attack and 3 defense, but here's what Marcus does. First, Marcus gives all the soldiers in your army +1 move, which if you remember the move numbers for the Romans, that's actually pretty important. So I kind of glossed over the fact that the Roman Legionnaires had a movement number of 4. Well, you're almost always going to be using them with Marcus, which gives them a movement number of 5, which is much more palatable as a melee unit. Much more palatable. 4 is really slow in HeroScape. Not only that, look at all the units that Marcus gives a soldier bonus to. This one, you thought I had to read it before. Listen to this. The 4th Massachusetts line, the 10th Regiment of Foot, the Airborne Elite, Captain America, maybe we'll go over to the Marvel set at one point, the Einar Imperium, the Roman Legionnaires, the Sacred Band, both of the original versions of Sergeant Drake Alexander, actually probably the new one, and Warforged soldiers. Marcus is also disciplined, and Marcus can not only be chosen as the bonding unit for the Roman Legionnaires, but also can be chosen as a bonding unit for the Sacred Band, which I keep alluding to.
I want you guys to be use your illusion, only now it's illusion with an A, so if you guys want to put an illusion in there somewhere.
I mentioned the movement bonus. I didn't even mention yet, Marcus gives an attack bonus to everyone he's adjacent to. Marcus is just over the line of becoming an S tier. Marcus Decimus Gallus is obviously an auto-include if you're going with Romans. What kind of does it for me too is that 6 life. That's a high number for a unique hero, especially one that's only 100 points. But Marcus is a great unit. I would say the strongest we've talked about in this wave so far. The next unit is the other Kyrie, Taelord, the Kyrie warrior. Taelord is the Utgar Kyrie, and is meant to stand in opposition to Kelda and Raylan. It was the first of actually many of the Utgar Kyrie. First, one silly aspect of Taelord's card. So Taelord's flying description actually intentionally omitted the last sentence. Normally, when you have a flying character, it says they still roll disengagement when they disengage with an enemy. Taelord has this weird thing where they just drop that sentence, like some intern at Hasbro was trying to be a smartass. So if you didn't read the whole text on flying every time you looked at a card, you were maybe going to miss the point that he effectively has stealth flying. He does not have disengage when he just walks. So if he has to be able to fly to get the disengagement, that's not really that important. You're almost always going to get disengaged. For 180 points, somewhat pedestrian, 3 attack, 3 defense, 5 life. But what Taelord gets is an attack or a bonus. So anyone within 4 spaces of Taelord, any friendly units, gets +1 attack die. And that can be very strong for certain units. You can have them with your Omnicron Snipers. And I actually teased this before. That's one of the best uses of Taelord, is to use them with the Omnicron Snipers because they get double skulls. You can use them with double attack like Savaris from the Master Set. Taelord can be very good. But his points cost means that unless you're going to get an amazing combo, he's prohibitively expensive. 180 is just so much. Compared also to Raylan, who was only 80 coming out of the Master Set, it's almost like an overcorrection. Taelord really should have been cheaper. 150 points I could see. Even that would seem a little bit much. As a result, Taelord's in the C tier. I'm not going to force him into the D tier just because we haven't had a D tier yet. The reason why he's still C tier is because of how great it can be when you do pair him up with the Omnicron Snipers or some of the other snipers. And because he is scary when he's out there. But you got to be playing a big army game, though, where you have like 1,000 points. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to squeeze him into your army and get any benefit. He actually mainly works with the minions of Utgar, which came in later expansion, which is a melee unit with double skulls. It's kind of like the Omnicron Snipers, but melee. That's who they're meant to go with because minions of Utgar have some other synergies with Taelord. And to be clear, there also are a lot of small synergies that Taelord benefits from. Close to met the Dark Lord, the Relentless personalities in there. Obviously, you got the Flag Bearer bonus. If you want to go with a Kyrie army, Atligod later came out, who gives all Kyries a bonus. You got the Death Knights of Valkyrie and the later D&D expansions. Like, there are a lot of small synergies with Taelord. It's enough that there are going to be uses for him. He's just too expensive. Almost expensive enough to drop him into the D tier. If he were 200, he would be down in the D tier. But he's right there. But Taelord, C tier. The next hero is the Venoc Warlord. The Venoc Warlord is a big Viper. He's like a Venoc Viper, but he's bigger. He also has claws, I think. So he's kind of more of a half Viper, half Salamander, or half Newt? Lizard? I don't know. He's got Slither, which I guess leans a little bit more towards Salamander, so he can go, like the Venoc Vipers, can slither through water without stopping. That doesn't really matter that much. So for 120 points, you're really using Venoc Warlord as a bonus. In fact, he's a bonus guy who just sits in the back because he doesn't need to be close to the people he doesn't need to be close to the other units that he's pumping up. So he's just sitting in the back row going...
The most satisfying feeling you can get in the gym is the pump.
First, he has scout leadership, so scouts, including the Venoc Vipers, get +2 movement. That's reason enough to include Venoc Warlord in your army. If you have 4 squads of Venoc Vipers, you're going to put Venoc Warlord in there too. And he improves the Frenzy rolls. So he reduces the threshold for getting a Frenzy boost by 1. So instead of a 25% chance of a Frenzy every time you roll for Frenzy with the Venoc Vipers or, say, the Aubrian Archers or the Elite Onyx Vipers, you now get it at 30% of your rolls. So you're rolling on a 15, which that doesn't sound like that much of a difference, but remember, sometimes you get 2 of these. So we're about a 9% chance of getting two extra moves and getting a triple turn or greater with your Vipers, compared to, what, like a 6% chance or so? Well, that 3% chance of another turn and keep going from there, it's something. The scout bonus is probably a little bit better. Venoc Warlord also is a pretty tough character when you actually got to try him out yourself. So once all your Vipers are just snakeskin shedding, scales everywhere, Venoc Warlord comes out with 4 attack, 3 defense, and a healthy 6 life. So the Venoc Warlord, S tier. Just in the S tier, like right there with Marcus Decimus Gallus for the best heroes in this expansion. If he could bond with the Venoc Vipers, I'm almost dropping him down to the A tier. Nah, he's still in the S tier. Actually, it's kind of nice that you get to leave him all the way in the back line and get all the boosts. Venoc Warlord, S tier. And the last unit, Tornak. Tornak is the Orc hero here. Tornak, like Grimnak and all the other Orcs, has a name that ends in AK. Tornak is another, Orc riding a dinosaur, which is cool. Although it's a different kind of dinosaur. I think it's more of like a hefty velociraptor type he's riding here. Tornak is very fast, of 7 move. With 3 life is kind of weak though. With 5 defense, it's, I guess, not that beefy of a dinosaur. I guess maybe they're not that bad compared to Grimnak. But Tornak has a few bonuses. First of all, Tornak does have disengage, which means that he's very fast and can keep moving. Tornak can also give the Blade Gruts a bonus. So all friendly Orc warriors, which are going to be the Blade Gruts and the Heavy Gruts, get +1 attack and +1 defense when next to Tornak. If you're going to do the double hero bonding thing with your Blade Gruts or your Heavy Gruts, you start off with Grimnak. Grimnak, big scary guy, send him out there. Maybe he's a little bit of a target out there. Maybe he's not the first guys you run with on your team, but You have to chop up some squads with Grimnak. When Grimnak's taken out, Tornak's fast enough then that you pull him out of the reserves and he runs up and catches up to your heavy Gruts or potentially even your blade Gruts. So that's what Tornak is used for. But because he's a little bit weaker, he's B tier. He's like right in the middle of the road. You're not going to be disappointed with him. It's not like he has 3 defense or anything like that. Tornak is fine, and Tornak is that's a good synergy with your Gruts. So Tornak is in there in the B tier. Tornak also is a tricky personality and gives a little bit of a bonus with Odonashi, but that's a little bit of a footnote as opposed to a main reason you'd use Tornak. And that's it for Wave 1, Mallidon's Prophecy. You've heard the prophecy. Let me know if you agree or disagree with these tier ratings. So there's no option for not letting me know what your thoughts are. You see, if you disagree or agree, let me know. Hope you enjoyed this video. We will get to more tier lists for Classic HeroScape, as again, I have spent a non-negligible portion of my life playing this game, and I'll see you in the next video.